Welcome, everyone, to the very first installment of the MMA DFS Gurus podcast. I'm your host, GK, the fight analyst, and this here is my man, JohnStargaryan MMA from the MMA Twitter universe. What's up, bro? How's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. I'm excited to get some fights finally. How's it going with you?
Great, man. I'm great on this Wednesday hump day. Trying to get through the work and finally get to some fights on Saturday night. We've been waiting for this for so long, and it's finally here. With that said, before we get down into the nitty gritty of breaking down this DFS slate for the $1 million prize that we got going on here, tell everybody about yourself, so who they know who they're talking to here.
Yeah, so I am a pretty hardcore fan of MMA and better. I tweet a lot about fights. You can find me at MMA Fox, that's FAWKES on Twitter. I've been into the sport for a long time, got into kind of the gambling aspect of it the last 4 or 5 years, and gotten really into the DFS aspect of it in the last year or two. And I think I have a decent grasp on the game, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, man. Let's get right down to it. I guess we can start on the prelims. The very first fight on the card, I believe it is Ryan Spann taking on Sam Alvey. I know the betting lines really do play, I think, a vital role in DFS breaking down. At least from my perspective, I think it plays a pretty big role. And Ryan Spann is a heavy favorite, -410. And the comeback on Sam Alvey is a +330 dog, and rightfully so. Their DK salaries are polar opposites. Spann is the heaviest salary at 9,300, and Sam Alvey is the cheapest on the slate at 6,900. So, what's your take on this fight? And do you see possibly putting either one of these guys into your lineups?
It's a rough fight all around, to be honest. I think you and I talked about this in our group chat, but I would never have the guts to go out there and place a bet on Sam Alvey here. But I do think it's a funky fight. He's gotten finished a couple times lately, but until his last 2 fights, he'd really been the peak of durability. And so it's I do think Spann is a better fighter everywhere here, but Spann's not really a high volume guy, and Alvey is known for being durable. And so it's if you're rostering Spann, you're hoping that he's going to knock out Alvey early because he's probably not putting up points if it goes to decision, and maybe not putting up a lot even if it goes to the second or third round. And then on the flip side, if you're rostering Alvey, you just shouldn't be rostering Alvey unless he gets a miracle first round knockout. Even if this goes to decision and he pulled out a win, I mean, what's his volume number? It's 3 significant strikes a minute. It's something awful that.
It's only 3 per minute. Yeah, 3.05.
And there's no wrestling upside with him. So you're talking about him, unless he hits a knockout in the first round, you're talking about him his absolute peak being in the 70-point range. And so he can't be trusted. I have no problem playing Spann here, but I just don't think you should play him big, especially with some of the other bigger guys in the card who are more likely to finish with better matchups like Luke and Verdun.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's way too expensive. I mean, I know he's looked great in his first 3 wins in the UFC, but I mean, low output. He only throws 7.58 strikes per minute. He's landing only 3.26, so you're pretty much hoping that he gets a finish. And I mean, right now he's inside the distance line is -131, so it gives him about a finish rate of 56.71%. They think he's going to get a finish here. I mean, great odds, but I mean, naturally, it's not a sure thing. I don't see it being a sure thing that he's definitely going to get that 100 points for you, 9,300, lock him in. I don't see that.
Right, and even if, let's say he just comes out there and starches him in the first round, you might be talking about a situation where he only puts up around 100, 105 points anyway, which is a good total, but I think there's better options and a much higher upside in that top tier.
Yeah, that's definitely true, because it also limits you elsewhere on your roster if you're rostering the highest guy on there, and you better damn sure get that knockout or that submission early, because if not, he's not going to be worth the money.
Nope, and your lineup's basically lit on fire.
Exactly. So it's a dumpster fire, and I don't see him being a sure thing to get a knockout. I mean, I think he's a sure thing to win, but he's not a sure thing to get the win inside the distance, and that's what you're looking for at 9,300.
Yeah, I mean, you could justify him.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. No, you're good.
You could make a justification for playing him in a cash game, I suppose. Even though I'd still kind of lean to some of the other upper tier players. But yeah, I mean, if you're going after that top prize, he's not really what you want.
No, yeah, that's right. Cash game's a lot different than the Millie Maker that we're kind of trying to focus on here, because everybody's trying to get in and get that $200,000 top prize. I know I sure as hell I'm going to get some exposure in there as much as I possibly can. And this is the best time to get into DFS slate because there's going to be a lot of people that really don't know much about the sport that's coming in and putting their money in there. So the less people that don't know, the more that you can easily beat out. So better for us to cash and make that big money. So next fight up, we got Bryce Mitchell taking on Charles Rosa. Right now, Bryce Mitchell, I think, is about a -150 favorite. Charles Rosa is around a +130 underdog. If you look at the implied win probability, you got Bryce Mitchell at 60.78% to win, and the comeback on Rosa 42.55%. Their DraftKings salaries are $8,500 for Mitchell and $7,700 for Rosa. What's your take in this one?
I hate this fight. I just hate this fight all around. I hated it when I was looking it up from a betting perspective. I hate it here. It's like I expect Mitchell to kind of justify that line, and I expect him to probably win this fight. But he doesn't wrestle at a particularly high rate. I think he only lands about 1.75 takedowns for 15 minutes. And, so he doesn't land strikes at a high rate either. So for him to have any chance to pay that off in the mid-range, you need a finish. And it's just like it could happen, I guess, but Rosa's never been subbed before. And he's a black belt, so I don't think it's likely. And when you look at like Mitchell's top game, it can be a bit shaky at times. And also he doesn't really throw a ton of ground and pound. So I don't think he's going to KO him. Like I think the chances of a finish here are like fairly low from Mitchell's perspective, and so I really have no interest in him like at all in like big contests, like just full fade for me. And if it burns you, it burns you. Like my one concern there is Dennis Stiver passed Charles Rosa's guard 15 times, which is a little bit of a concern. And then on the other side with Rosa, like I would on a normal slate in a normal card, I would be interested in Rosa because I think he's very live to win the fight. Frankly, I think he's live for a submission more so than Mitchell is. But if you look at that lower tier this week, there's a ton of killers there, and it's only going to take one or two of them hitting to just shut him out completely. So I have no interest in the fight really at all.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. There's not really a clear path to victory for either guys. It's going to be a very tough, close, fought out fight. The finish rate for either guy is fairly minimum. I think Mitchell only has a 31.75% chance of getting a finish here due to the line right now. Mitchell doesn't throw a ton of volume. He's going to look to grapple a lot. I know transitions really get you a lot of points, but I don't know how much transitions Rosa is going to really allow. It might just be a stalemate on the mat, so I don't see a lot of volume, just a bunch of grappling match, not a lot of striking, low variance. I'm definitely passing, especially maybe you can justify Rosa as a cheap 7,700 play, get you 60 points maybe if you're lucky. But there's other people that are cheaper than him that could possibly surpass that by a good ton.
Yeah, you're looking at DeCastro, Gagey, and Stevens right around the same price range as Rosa. So it's like, how do you play him when those guys are there?
No, I completely agree with you there. Definitely. But let's move forward on the next fight of the card. We got Vicente Luque taking on Nico Price, and what's going to be an absolute barn burner of a fight. Right now, you got Luque at a -275 favorite, which gives him about a 73.33% chance of winning, and the comeback on Nico Price is +235 with a 29.85% chance of winning. Right now, The DK salaries are Luque at 9,000 and Nico Price at 7,200. How do you see this one playing out, and can you roster either one of these two in the Millie Maker?
Not only can you roster either of them, you can roster both. Well, can't stack them, but you can roster both, in my opinion, heavily. So I am going to have probably, if I'm playing 100 lineups here, I'm probably looking at about 65 to 70% ownership across the board here. And Luque is actually, he's my number 2 overall ranked fighter in the top tier, and overall for the entire slate, he's probably my number 4 overall fighter here. I expect Luque to win. I expect that price, the minus 290, is just about right on him, and he'll win at about that rate. And if he does win, he's either going to get an early finish or he's going to put up stupid volume numbers here. So, like, this is what I was talking about with this fan thing. Like, if Luque in a win is live to go to, like, that 120, 130 range, and probably with average in, like, the 100 to 110 range. And then on the other side, you know, Price, as we all know, is the epitome of, like, a meme finisher here. And, you know, Price, his pretty much only path is KO, but I do think it's a live path. So, like, if I was doing 70% exposure, I wouldn't be like 60% of that on Luque and then 10% on Price, because, you know, Price has probably about a 1 in 4 shot here. And if he hits that and he finishes Luque, especially if it's early in this fight, you know, he's very, very likely to hit optimal, I think. And given the amount of damage we've seen Luque take, you know, the last year or so, I think it's far more likely than it would have been, say, before he fought Wonderboy Thompson or Brian Barberena. So in my mind, like, this is one of the best fights on the card to target for DraftKings. You want, you know, I couldn't even blame you if you went to a full 100% exposure, except there's so much finishing potential on this card that I wouldn't go that high. But it's going to be highly owned on both sides for me.
Definitely. I mean, you touched base on pretty much everything. You know, I would definitely play both of these guys. They're on both of multiple different lineups for me. There's, you know, they got finish abilities on both sides. I feel that, you know, with Nico Price, it's only a matter of time that Luque is going to get his chin, you know, knocked off his shoulders. It's only a matter of time. You're talking about a guy that went to a split decision with Mike Perry. The only reason why Mike Perry lost was because of the fact that he had a broken nose. He was absolutely, you know, putting it to Luque here. And if he lets Perry off, if he lets Price do the same thing that Perry did, he's absolutely he has a chance of really getting a KO, and he's only 7,200. He's one of the cheapest guys on the slate. That's absolutely ridiculous. I think it's a 50-50 fight. I've done this multiple times. I think the last time I did this was when Derek Rodriguez took on Tim Means. Perfect example. 50-50 fight. You price that guy all the way down to 6,800. I believe it was around 68, 6,600. Yep. It was you know, a super short notice fight for him, but they're going to throw down in the middle. And if you lose on Derek Rodriguez, it's okay because he's 66, 6,800. You got everybody else up top that you're stacking. Well, he came out and knocked Tim Means out in the second round, and then you got the perfect optimal lineup right then and there. So I can see exposure on both these guys. A finish is definitely coming. You're talking about the inside the distance line on Vicente Luque. It's minus 160. So he's one of the. I think he's got the best line. Yeah, he's got the best line to finish out of everybody in the entire slate. Minus 160 to finish.
Which is kind of crazy when you consider Francis is on this slate too.
Francis for Doom as well. Tony Ferguson. I mean, he has the best inside the distance line. It's because of the fact that Nico always, tends to get finished in his fights.
And to your point, like if you roster Price here, you can almost triple up on a lineup with like something like Francis Verdum and like Ferguson as well. So it gives you just a lot of flexibility.
Absolutely. That's what I feel like you have to get some of those cheaper guys that at least will put up and fight for your lineup, give you 50 points and, hard fought lineup, and then you can get the other guys that that are kind of a sure thing to get you your 70, 80, 90, 100, 110 points. Especially in this slate, you have 2 5-round fights. I know one of them obviously isn't going to go 5 rounds, but it has the potential to go 5 rounds. So you're going to want to roster both in those fights. So you're able to do that when you roster someone like Nico Price or like a Jeremy Stevens or someone of the lower tier.
For sure.
Next up, we have a very interesting matchup between Uriah Hall and Jacare Souza. These are kind of old, odds. So I think Hall is a little bit better, but he's on mine. I got plus 105 with a 48.78% chance for him to win, and the comeback on Souza minus 125 with a 55.56% chance for him to win. Right now, their DK salaries are 7,900 for Hall and 8,300 for Souza. So, do you have a play on either one of these guys? Would you put them in one of your games?
Yeah, so to be honest, it's kind of a weird fight because I wouldn't trust. So in the big tournaments for what we're talking about here, I don't have much interest in Hall at all, even though the line is fairly close, because Hall's not going to pump a ton of volume, and you pretty much, maybe roster him on 5% or 10% of lineups and just hope he lets the KO in the first round. But I just don't think it's very likely, and I think. Just look at his career. He's got very few first-round knockouts, a lot of knockouts. But if he doesn't get it in the first round, then he's basically a bust, and he's not the kind of guy who's going to win and score 95 points in a decision. So he's hard to trust from that angle. So I don't really have a ton of interest in him. Again, that 7K range is loaded this week. And on the other side of the octagon, I actually do have some interest in Jacare. I don't think he's going to be very highly owned in GPPs. And I know he hasn't finished in a while, and he hasn't finished by submission in a while. But he excels at getting to the body lock, getting guys against the fence, and getting them down from there. And Hall is absolutely awful at denying that. And so I kind of expect, even though he struggled with takedowns lately, Jacare is going to find some takedowns here. And I keep hearing from people about Antonio Carlos Jr. and how he's the better jiu-jitsu grappler. And it's well, that's not really true. Jacare's got 18 submission wins in his career. He's actually the more credentialed grappler on just straight jiu-jitsu rolling. So. Yeah, I actually think there's a pretty good chance that Jacare is going to get a finish here. And even if he doesn't, I don't know if he'll pay out optimal, but I could see a fight where he lands 2 or 3 takedowns and passes Hall's guard 7 or 8 times, lands 60 to 70 strikes, and puts up a pretty decent number that way too. So I wouldn't say he's near the top of my mid-range rankings, but he's there, and he's definitely someone who I think you could justify rostering on a fair amount of lineups here.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If you're looking around the same tier, the only fighters around him, you have Carlos Esparza, 8,400. I don't think you're going to take Esparza over, Souza. You have also Anthony Pettis and Donald Cerrone. Maybe you can see a case for either one of those guys, but I feel more safe with Souza's path to victory, and his strongest ability is the biggest weakness for Hall, and that's his grappling, Light years better in the submission game. I think he's even better, like I said, than Antonio Carlos Jr. Jr. definitely had a shot of finishing it multiple times, but if Souza gets that chance of finishing by rear naked choke or by any type of submission, he's going to get it. Especially against someone like Hall, who's very not good in grappling whatsoever. He doesn't even compete in grappling. He actually trained his wrestling with his head coach for this fight. So you already know that he's at a massive disadvantage going into this one. So, I definitely like him. He's actually a pretty good cheap play for the most part in the mid-tier, 8,300. He averages 75.9 DraftKings points per fight. So that's not that bad. His inside distance line is plus 170, gives him about a 37.04% chance to get a finish, which is actually one of the lower ones on the, I think it's about top 5, top 6 best inside the distance lines of the entire slate. So he's definitely got a clear path to victory there, as long as he can get on the inside of the reach of Hall, which I don't think should be a bit of a problem, because Hall is not a punch first fighter. He waits for you to make the first punch. So as long as he punches first, moves forward, he should get in between, underneath his legs and just take his ass down. And that's all she wrote there. What else? Okay, next up we have Carlos Esparza taking on Michelle Waterson. Right now, Esparza is a minus 155 favorite on my list here with a 60.78% chance of winning. And the comeback on Waterson is plus 135 with a 42.55% chance of winning. Their DK salaries are 8,400 for Esparza and 7,800 for Waterson. What's your take on this one? Would you roster either one of these girls?
I have no interest in Waterson here. I have a small degree of interest in Esparza, very small. Like I might put her on like 5% of the lineups, just because I think there is, even though I personally think, and I actually would bet on her, that she's going to just hold Waterson down, there is, I think, a small outcome here where maybe Waterson gets up a bunch of times and you see Esparza land like 8 to 10 takedowns and maybe 6 or 7 advances, and then she kind of just puts up a funky 90 to 100 points. So I might put her on 5% of lineup just as a contrarian play, because if you want to be a solo winner of that 200K, you really need to distinguish yourself, and I don't expect she'll be highly owned at all. But ultimately, I think this is going to be a very low volume, very low scoring fight that takes place primarily with Carla Esparza laying on top of Michelle Waterson. And as much fun as that might be for some people to watch, it's not going to do as much for DK.
You're right about that. I mean, but yeah, Esparza here. I mean, I do have some exposure to her, not a ton like you. Her grappling is top notch. You know, she's averaging over 10 takedown attempts per 15 minutes, and you're talking about Waterson gives up 50% of those. So that means if she goes and tries to defend 10 takedowns, she's going to get taken down at least 5 times. So 5 takedowns, racks up a ton of points with the transitions, the ground and pound. You know, it all adds up. I know she's probably going to only land, 30, 40 strikes. I'd probably say 30 to, I would say 50 at the peak, but I don't really think that. It's about 30 to 45 strikes. And she lands, 3, 4 takedowns, maybe 5 guard passes, around that, 3 to 5 guard passes. Should, and plus the win by decision, which is 30 points, probably get you at least a decent 60, 65 points, which is not bad considering where she's at. But I think she's really, really safe. She's got a low ceiling, but I think she's a very, very safe bet to get you your 60, 65 points.
Yeah.
And sometimes you want that safety net, you know, in DK. Okay, this person probably definitely is going to win more times than not. Get me my 65 solid points, and then we can roster around that. Get your top tier fighters that could get you your 100 points or so.
For sure. And also, like, kind of playing off that, I do kind of think there's a small chance she could finish here. Like, you brought up Waterson's takedown defense. If you actually look at her career, she hasn't faced literally any wrestlers. So, like, Esparza is going to be the best wrestler she's ever faced. So I think there's a small chance that Esparza can just kind of get on top of her in advanced position at will, just maybe end up on her back in a dominant position. You know, she submitted Angela Hill in the Ultimate Fighter in like a similar manner. I'm not think it's likely, but I do think, you know, that's in play, since this should be a massive step up grappling-wise for her.
Yeah, I mean, she's been taken down by much lesser, you know, wrestlers and grapplers throughout her entire career. So I'd be surprised if she fends off, you know, the takedowns by Esparza. So I'm definitely all over Esparza betting-wise. DK-wise, I definitely have some exposure as well. Next up, we have Alexei Oleinik taking on Fabricio Verdum in his return back inside the octagon after a 2-year USADA banishment from the octagon. Right now, the odds are Alexei Oleinik at plus 255, and the comeback on Fabricio Verdum is minus 310. That gives Oleinik only a 28.17% chance of winning, and Verdum gets a 75.61% chance. Right now, their DK salaries are Oleinik at 7,000 and Verdum at 9,200, which is the second most expensive fighter on the slate. So, what's your thoughts on this one?
I'm all over Verdum here. He's probably my number 3 ranked fighter overall for this card for DFS. My number 1 in the top range. You know, we've talked a good bit about this fight, but I see virtually no viable path to victory for Oleinik here, short of him landing, you know, a right hand. But like, I watched, you know, I was taping Alistair Overeem last night, and I watched, you know, his fight with Oleinik, who hit him at about 60 strikes and didn't get close to hurting, you know, the least durable fighter in the division. I think the odds of like Oleinik knocking out Verdum are very small, and consequently, I have no interest in playing Oleinik like whatsoever. And from Verdum's standpoint, I know the over/under. I know the finish odds aren't that great. I think he's minus 149. about that?
Yeah, 145. Yeah.
Yeah, I know his finish odds, they're good, but I think they should be even higher than that. Oleinik gasses after 3 minutes every fight. He has no grappling edge here. And, I mean, he has no edge literally anywhere.
Yeah.
I think Verdum finishes him in close to 70% of the time this fight plays out. And so consequently, I think Verdum's a real threat to just smash the slate. I expect him to be fairly highly owned, but, this is the kind of fight where if Verdum takes him down, he could end up passing his guard like 8 to 10 times here and just beating him up if Oleinik doesn't get finished early. So like the later this goes, the more beneficial it might be. And I think his floor is extremely high here, like in the 90 to 100 point range. So I'm all over Verdum here.
Yeah, I think he's probably one of the locks of the slate to get a finish and to definitely get a win. I think Oleinik is I mean, he's got a ton of experience, but he doesn't have experience against and beating somebody like Verdum. Even coming off the 2-year layoff, it's not like he injured off the 2-year layoff. He was banned for a banned substance for the 2-year layoff. So I don't see any way that Oleinik is going to be able to, knock him out. I don't see any way he's going to be able to submit the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I mean, it's just going to be hard for him to really do anything that Verdum has not seen before. I mean, he could catch him with some funky, overhand right because he does have an 80-inch reach and he does some unpredictable and crazy strikes. He just kind of comes forward throwing stupid stuff, but I don't see that really doing any effect on Verdum. And he probably should be in almost everybody's lineup. He should be rostered in like 100% of teams because of the fact that he has a minus, like I said, a minus 145 to finish. That gives him a 59.18% chance of winning. He's just better everywhere, and I just don't see how Oleinik gets his fight won. So I think everybody should roster Verdum and just take your 100 points and just love it.
Agreed. And to your point, he's been off for 2 years, but that might actually have helped his chin. Whereas Oleinik's been viciously finished twice in the last year and is also 42 years old and isn't a world-class athlete. So,
yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I like Oleinik. He's cool and stuff like that. But like you're talking about a guy that literally just gets his chin cracked on a fightly basis.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so definitely take Verdum. Whatever you do, he should be your sure-in thing to get at least a win. But I don't see how he doesn't get a finish here. But moving forward, we have a great fight here. I think it's at 170 pounds. Keep that in mind. 170, not 155 pounds between Anthony Pettis and Donald Cerrone. Right now, the betting lines, I think, are about minus 140 Anthony Pettis with a 58.33% chance of winning. And the comeback on Donald Cerrone is plus 120 with a 45.45% chance of winning. The DK salaries are $8,200 for Anthony Pettis and $8,000 for Donald Cerrone. Who do you got in this one? Are you roster any of these two on your lineups?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, this fight. So I have moderate interest in Cerrone here. Obviously, we know the deal with Pettis. If you can weather the early storm, the dude will and quit. So Cerrone's fairly live for a finish late in the fight, I think. But I'm not. If he doesn't get a finish, I don't see a way. I don't think his volume's okay, but I don't think it's good enough for him to be, competitive for optimal. So I'll play him in some places in case Pettis does crack down the stretch. And I actually like him overall in this fight. But that said, I actually think Pettis is a phenomenal option for this fight. Well, again, it's weird because if it was a cash game, Pettis will not sniff my lineup. Frankly, he's probably last in the tier for me in cash game just because of how high variance he is. But for a GPP, I mean, for his price, $8,200 is a nice price for a guy who, if he wins this fight, is almost certainly going to finish it in the first or second round. And I think, given Cerrone's history and the fact that I think he's only been finished in the second once by Masvidal. I mean, technically Ferguson, but that was stopped by the doctor. And so I think Pettis has a good chance to win this fight very early. And yeah, I think if he finishes, it's going to be in the first round. So it's like at $8,200, he's got a good chance to bank you 100, 105 points here. And there's not many other guys in that tier, in that 8,000 tier, outside of Ferguson, really there's nobody outside of Ferguson who's a lock to get near those points. And so I really like Pettis here. I like him more than Cater in that tier. I even like him more than Jacare in that tier. I think he's going to lose, to be honest, but I think the value this is presenting at 8,200 is worth it, especially if you're going after 200K. So I'll probably roster him in a good amount of lineups here.
Interesting. I mean, I do like Cerrone a bit more than Pettis, mainly because of the striking numbers are, I think, if you look at them, you see that Cerrone has a much bigger advantage on the feet than we really see. And if you watch the fights that Cerrone loses are number one, are the big fights, the co-main events, the main events, where all eyes on him. Against, you talk about the last 3 losses were against Gaethje, were against Conor, were against Tony Ferguson. That's not who Pettis lost to the last 3. Don't get me wrong, he's lost to some good fighters, but Diaz, CDF, I mean, and then Tony, of course. But those aren't Conor, Gaethje, and Tony. You know way better. And those were high-profile fights. 2 were main events, and 1 was a co-main. So now he's in the middle of the prelims, where no one really gives a crap about him. I mean, yeah, people want to watch a fight, but it's not like he has to win this. This is the biggest fight of his life kind of thing. And I think that's really going to help him out in his mentality for this fight. And then being is that Pettis is not a fast starter at all whatsoever. He waits for you to throw first, and that bodes well for Cerrone because he loses to people that start fast. So I think the more volume you're talking about, Cerrone throws 4.3. He throws 9.41 per minute, which is almost 3 more strikes per minute than Pettis does at 6.46, and he lands 4.33 compared to Pettis' 2.97. So that's a massive striking discrepancy, in my opinion. I mean, it may look different because Pettis has more knockouts. And then another thing, keep in mind, it's 170 pounds. Pettis is completely much slower at 170 than he's 155. And Cerrone's way more durable at 170, in my opinion, I think, than he is at 155 cutting down. But that's just my 2 cents. If I'm rostering either one of these two, I'm really kind of not putting too much exposure there because it's really a high variance of a fight that really could go either way. We could get 2 guys that are really stalemate and just throwing a bunch of leg kicks and body kicks throughout this entire fight at distance, which I could really see happening. And then it goes to a decision, and each one of these guys are only getting a 50, 60 point win, or you can get a finish. So it could go either way. I'm kind of not taking either side here, but if I was to roster anybody of these 2 fighters, I would take Cerrone here.
To be honest with you, that was a pretty good breakdown, GK. I don't disagree with most of what you said. I look at that tier and it is like there's just not a lot of guys I like for finishes. And if anything, if Cerrone loses this fight, I think it's a fairly safe bet. The most likely way is going to be an early finish. Yeah, like a head kick or something.
Makes sense.
So
yeah, that definitely
you might
sense.
be right. You might be right though. I even originally think I might go 35% on Pettis, but I might scale that back a bit. I do think he is rosterable though.
Yeah, I mean, it could go any way. Either one of those guys can get a finish, and either one can go to decision and get middling points.
Well, if it goes to decision, I think Cerrone's going to win this fight. It's pretty confidently.
Yeah, same here.
So that's the other
yeah, I agree there too. So next up, we got in the heavyweight division, Yorgan De Castro. I think he's about a plus 170 favorite, giving him a 37.04% chance of winning. And Greg Hardy is a minus 200 favorite as a 66.67% chance of winning. The TK salaries for Castro is 7,600, and the comeback on Hardy is 8,600. What do you got in this one?
So it's honestly, it's a pretty weird fight in a lot of ways. As you know from our group text, I really like Hardy to win the fight, but I don't know if he's got power or not. He knocked out a couple cans. He hasn't really knocked out anyone since. But I also just wonder if that's just taking a more relaxed approach. And so I like Hardy's volume for a heavyweight, but he doesn't shoot takedowns, and he can't be, there's no guarantee that he's going to knock the Castro out. But it is heavyweight, so I'll probably roster a little of him. And then on the DeCastro side, like I really don't rate DeCastro's game much at all, to be honest with you. And he'll probably throw a moderate degree of volume as well. But Hardy's been insanely durable. Like he got abused the last 2 rounds against Volkov. I didn't really ever look close to going out. And so let me just say, I'm probably going to roster both a moderate amount, but I don't really trust either of them to finish. I really think this is going to a decision. And I think this could be the kind of fight that if you take like a 70% exposure to, because it's a heavyweight fight with 2 names, you end up wanting to shoot yourself because it turns into a low volume shit fest. I don't love it. I'll probably be 10 to 15% on each guy. I don't think, just because it's heavyweight, but I don't think the knockout's likely here.
Yeah, this is a very weird heavyweight type of fight. You think going in that, definitely going to be under 1.5 rounds. One of these 2 dudes are going out, but then you think, I don't really know. They're both pretty tough. They both got chins on them, but we really haven't seen Castro fight anyone and knock out anyone good. And then you have Hardy that's knocked out only cans, like you said. So really don't know. I mean, Greg Hardy has a massive reach advantage. He's got a 6-inch reach advantage, 80-inch reach. So, Castro's going to have to come in on that reach. And he's going to get tagged a ton. So, and then if he does come in, he does got some powerful punches. So I really don't know. It's a really high variance kind of fight.
Yeah.
I definitely like Greg Hardy to win. I think he's the more polished striker, the more polished MMA fighter of the 2. Very early in their careers. You talk about the Castro actually was 0-4, I believe, in his amateur record. Then he popped off in his pro, and now he's 5 or 6-0.
Yeah.
So at first he really wasn't that great, but then you also look over his career. He also hasn't fought anyone good. At least Greg Hardy fought one of the best heavyweights on the planet, and Alexander Volkov. Now he's going down a notch.
DeCastro's regional opponents were absolute cans too. Like we're not talking about he wasn't in LFA fighting, future champions or future contenders either here. So
he's
unknown. He's unknown. Like I don't.
Sure. You're talking about Greg Hardy. What was it? His 2nd or 3rd fight was against Austin Lane. On the Contender Series. Then he goes to Island Fights and fights someone there, and he knocks him out, and then gets back to the show. So, I feel like he's grown a lot at American Top Team, and he's pretty much beaten everybody that's put in his place, other than taking a short notice fight against one of the best heavyweights that the UFC's ever had. So, if I'm trying to roster either one of these 2, 8,600 is a lot for Hardy. I can see the Castro, being a cheap play and a dart kind of punt to just throw in there, because maybe he has some type of power. Maybe he has some decent, he's got those leg kicks. He throws some volume. He always throws, combinations, 1, 2, 3 leg kick, 1, 2, 3 leg kick. So, he's going to have volume. He's going to be throwing a lot. So, I don't know. I probably wouldn't really play anybody in this fight, but if I had to choose anybody, I'd probably go with the cheap playing to Castro, just because you can maybe squeak out a KO. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
Next up, we have in the featherweight division, Jeremy Stephens taking on Calvin Kattar. Right now, I believe the line I have is Jeremy Stephens plus 195, and the comeback on Calvin Kattar is minus 235. That gives Stephens a 33.90% chance to win, and Calvin Kattar a 70.15% chance to win. Right now, the DK salaries are Jeremy Stephens at 7,300 and Calvin Kattar at 8,900. So, are you rostering any one of these 2?
Yeah, so I actually have I like Stephens a good bit here. Just as, first of all, I think it's an interesting fight, and I think it's a bit closer than what the common public thought is on it. I obviously favor Kattar, but second of all, Stephens is in that that weird range in the lower tier, and I think anybody who watches Kattar fight, the guy loves to brawl in the pocket, and so Stephens he's probably the biggest hitter at 145, and so he's going to have a chance to end this fight. And if he wins, it's most likely going to be by knockout. And so I think Stevens has a real chance to hit optimal in a win, and I think he wins this fight almost 40% of the time, in my opinion anyway. And we can get more into that on Friday. But I do think it's a decent spot for Stevens. You know, he's obviously not someone I'd ever play in cash games because he is pretty reliant on getting that knockout here. But if he does, he's a good bet to hit optimal. So I'll have like a decent amount of exposure to Stevens. Not a ton, but a good amount just for the upside. From the Cater side, I don't have a ton of interest. I'll probably have a couple lineups with him on it just because, but you know, he's very high volume, but I don't think he's a good bet to finish here. I know he's finished his last 3 victories, but I think Stevens has only been finished twice in his career. And so I really think I think the most likely outcome in this fight is Cater wins by decision. And I think in a decision, like what if Cater, let's say he goes off, which hasn't really happened to Stevens, and lands 120 significant strikes, you're talking about 90 points, and he's kind of in that Ferguson, Verdun, Luque tier. And so if you're trying to win $200,000, I think you just need better upside. You know, obviously anything can happen, and maybe he does knock him out in the second round and really puts up a crazy score. But I think there's just much safer bets in that upper tier. So I may play him in a couple lineups, but not a ton of interest.
Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense. I mean, I love Calvin Kattar as a betting standpoint. I think he wins by decision. But at this price point, 8,900, he's, like you said, he's in the tier with Francis Ngannou, Vicente Luque, Verdun, Tony Ferguson. You're not going to take, you know, Calvin Kattar over them. He's only averaging 76.4 Draftkings points per fight. So you already know he's got to get a knockout in order for him to really hit optimal. And I don't think he's going to get a knockout against Stevens because the last time Stevens got knocked out, it wasn't a head strike that most Kattar really does, you know, throw. He doesn't throw a ton of body strikes, and that's how Aldo was able to, you know, get the knockout against Stevens. So, but I do like Stevens as a cheap dart type of play. He has the power to end the fight at any given point. So if he does get that, you know, knockout, he's optimal lineup, point blank. He's just like in the same boat as Nico Price. I think it's a 50-50 chance that he gets, you know, knocked out. There's a 50-50 chance. So if you take a 50-50 chance and you have Jeremy Stevens at 7,300, I think you take that. I think you take that 50-50 chance. Obviously, you're not going to have him on every single lineup, but I think you have to have some type of exposure to him. I think you have to have some exposure to Jeremy Stevens. You need exposure to Nico Price, and then you're going to need exposure on the next guy we're going to talk to as well, Yair Rozenstruik as well. You know, those are guys that you need to have some type of exposure to. Cheap guys that can get you the money if they get the knockout. And if it happens, you're in the money. You're golden. But, yeah, that's why I got on that one.
Well, I think you're right. And if you actually look at, like, you know, if you look at that tier, and obviously we'll get into a couple of them in a second, as you said, but you have basically Gagey, Cruz, Rozenstruik, Stevens, and Price. And I'd be surprised if 2 of them don't win. Like, I'd guess 2 of them win. And if 2 of those guys win, they're going to be optimal. So, like, if you're playing multiple lineups, you do, like, those 5 guys, you want to have them, like, pretty nicely divided in there.
No, I completely agree with you there. I mean, they're so stacked on the bottom of, like, the cheap slates. Yeah. Like you said, you have Gaethje, Cruz, Rozenstruik, you have Stevens, you know, you have all those guys, and Nico Price, like, fairly cheap. It's crazy. Like, this slate is just insane. It's very top heavy, but it's also very bottom heavy as well. So it's like there's in the middle of the pack, the 80 some hundreds are shaky. The mid 700s are kind of shaky as well. You want to have everybody in the low and the top. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it kills me because I like to play a pretty tight core and play it aggressively. And I just don't think it's a viable option here because of how that distribution is.
Yeah, I feel it's crazy that they did it this way. You know, given that there's going to be so many people out there that are playing this weekend, like a lot of people will be playing. Yeah. So more than normal. So they really need to ramp up their salaries to kind of get this algorithm fixed out. But next up we have Francis Ngannou taking on Yair Rozenstruik. Right now Ngannou is a minus 275 favorite. The comeback on Rozenstruik is plus 235 right now. Francis has a 73.33% chance to win, and Yair has a 29.85% chance to win. Ngannou has a 9,100 salary, and Rosenstruck has a 7,100 salary. So who do you got in this one?
Yeah, so it's like kind of a weird one, right? Because the over 1.5, I think, is what, -110. Like it's which is pretty unusual for a Francis fight.
Yeah.
And like if this goes over, like Francis is going to bust for sure, and Yair's probably going to bust as well. Because like neither of these guys, well, I mean, Yair's volume is okay, but Francis's is really poor. So, but at the same time, it's like these are two world-class knockout artists, so it feels like you've got to be, invested in this. So I guess I have moderate degree of interest in both. I probably have more interest in Yair, to be honest with you, than Francis, because I really do think Verdum and Luque are better options here. I'll have some plays with Francis, obviously, because the power threat's just too good to pass up. But on the other side, like Yair, we just talked about that lower tier, and if he wins, I think he's got a decent chance to win by knockout. Especially if Francis goes balls to the wall here and tries to knock him out, he's a good counterpuncher, and I could see him putting him out. I actually almost think he's more likely to end the fight in the first round. I don't want to say it. I say too much. We can get into it on Friday, but I like Rosenstruck a fair bit. I'd probably spread out plays between like him, Stevens, Price, like that tier, like pretty evenly.
Yeah, I pretty much have exposure to both these guys. It's hard not to, considering their finish rates are through the roof, and you think that going in, one of these guys is gonna get knocked the fuck out. But you thought the same thing when Francis fought Derek Lewis. But then again, after that Lewis fight, Francis comes in and knocks out everybody in the next three fights: Blades, Kane, Velasquez, and JDS. So comes in there, knocks them all out in the first round within like the first minute for both of them. So all three of them. And then you have Rosenstruck, who knocked out a bunch of nobodies compared to Ngannou, and then barely beat Overeem in the last second, of their fight. But he still has power. So, like you said, if Ngannou it comes in too reckless. If he overextends on his punches, Yair can all he needs is a check left hook, and he's knocking you out unconscious when you're off balance. So, it's either guy can throw down that one punch and get a win. So I feel you have to have exposure to both of these fighters. I think it's imminent. They need to be on your lineups either which way or the other. I think you have much better value on Rosenstruck because I think it's another fight that's 50-50, essentially. You have two power punchers. It's a 50-50 fight. I think you got much more value on Rosenstruck at 7,100 because then you can roster like Luque, Verdum, Antony, all those top tier guys and just be really top heavy. If you roster him and he gets the knockout or even a decision win, you'll take that all day. 60 points at 7,100, I'll take that all day.
Yeah, agreed.
Next up in the co-main event, we have Henry Triple C Cejudo taking on Dominic Cruz. Right now, the betting lines are -220 for Cejudo and +180 for Cruz. Gives Cejudo a 68.75% chance to win and Cruz a 35.71% chance. Cejudo is an 8,800 DK salary and Cruz is a 7,400. And this is the first time in, I think, a while that Cejudo is the betting favorites. So, who do you have in this one?
Well, you know how I feel about this fight, but
sure,
I
do.
I actually don't have a ton of interest in this fight, to be honest. I think
really
I have a ton of interest in the fight for DraftKings though. Like
you have to.
So it's weird though, right? Because like if you look at Cejudo's fight with DJ when he beat him, that went a full 5 rounds, and what did he score? Like 65 points? It was something like that. Like so like he's like relatively like low volume unless he finishes here, and even Cruz. Like if you look at his fight with Dillashaw, he was also only in the I think he only scored like 90 points, 95 points when they went the full 5 rounds. And so it's like, I don't expect, if somebody, I'll put it this way, I think Cejudo would probably be my preferable play here because I think he's far more likely to finish. And I'm going to have exposure for both. Let me put it that way. But like most 5-round fights, I'm going to have pretty heavy exposure both ways. And in this one, it's going to be a little more muted because I don't think, like, for Cruz to hit his win condition here, I think it's going to be like a weird looking fight where he maybe lands like 85 strikes and Cejudo's 60. And like, you know, that could pay off at his number, I guess, you know, depending on how many finishes happen the rest of the card. But it's not reliable with the amount of killers in that tier, in my opinion. Cejudo, on the other hand, especially if Cruz is washed, which is a possibility, could come out and just run through him in a round or two. So I'll probably have like Cejudo on like 25-30% of lineups, but I'll have some exposure to Cruz, but I don't think, just because, like I said, I think Cruz's best chance to win this fight involves him just kind of limiting Cejudo's output and dancing around him and being really careful. And so it's hard for me to trust that to score really high. So I probably won't have more than like 10 to 15% that way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you have to have exposure to this fight because it's a 5-round fight, and
Right.
I'm always have exposure to 5-round fights because of the fact that you get those 2 extra rounds to make up some work in the first 3 rounds. So it is a must. But I would probably take both these fighters on my lineups, but I would go more of a 70-30 split on Cejudo just because he does have that stopping power. He does actually land more than Cruz does, about a third of a strike more. And if you look at the numbers, he doesn't throw a ton less. He throws about 2.5 strikes less per minute than Cruz. So it's not crazy output that Cruz does have over him. You have 11.39 strikes per minute thrown by Cruz and 8.68 for Cejudo. So it's not a massive difference. And then you have that Cruz is only landing 31% of his strikes, which, you know, after looking over the numbers, it kind of boggles me in my mind. I didn't even know that it was such a low number and so high for Cejudo, landing 44% of his strikes. He's gotten immensely better in the strike department from DJ all the way to Marlon Moraes. I mean, he's gotten immensely better. I think the forward pressure is going to break Cruz. You're talking about, I don't think he's going to be able to come in, just dip in and out, because Cejudo is going to let him come in and he's going to counter. He's going to give power. You're talking about Cody Garbrandt knocked him down. You know, I think it was like twice, if I'm not mistaken. Or I know at least was once.
There were 3 times.
Yeah, so I don't think his chin is just magically going to get better at 36 years old. I mean, he got dropped in another fight previous to that as well. He's been out. He has been fighting for 4 years. I know time off maybe helps your chin, but you're not sparring. You're not training. You're not practicing. You're not doing anything. He's commentating. He's had multiple knee surgeries. He's looking older. I don't care what anybody says. He's looking older. And I feel like we're not gonna see the same Cruz that we've seen last time he came off, surgery. The last time he came off a long layoff, the ring rust is gonna be real here, and he's in a rude awakening. People really sleep on Triple C here because of his the cringe and the heel that he puts on, but that dude can fight. He's looking like a beast right now, man. Neuroforce 1 looking like he's juiced up to the gills. And he's got some power in those hands. Bro, I'm telling you that he's got juice in those veins, bro. He's got some juice in those veins.
I actually am a little bit, and we can get into it Friday too. We do the full breakdown, but like I am, as you know, like pretty bullish on Cruz in this spot. I think to at least be competitive. But the sheet that I sent you last night, I had him listed second originally, and I did some digging today. He averages about 100 points on DraftKings, but if you actually look in, he's landing 4, 6, 8 takedowns and passes every fight. And even if he lands 1 or 2 takedowns here, I don't think he's going to be passing or holding Cejudo down much. So it's just like, that's kind of my point. Like, I originally liked him a lot in that tier, but the more I think about the matchup, first of all, taking Cejudo down is going to be going into Cejudo's world and initiating the clinch, which I don't think he's going to look to do. And so I just don't think, as you said, Cejudo's got a major power advantage. Cruz is going to want to keep this basically a game of tag. And so I just don't think he's a reliable option here to score. But in terms of the fight, yeah, I mean, you could be right. And look, I said, if Cruz, there is a chance, a decent probability that Cejudo comes out and just walks through him and starches him in 2 rounds, which definitely makes him worth rostering for sure. And on the other side, like I said, I'm not that interested in Cruz. I'll play a little bit just in case, something crazy happens or, he puts on the best output of his career, but I'm not that interested.
Yeah, I think it's a great fight for the fans. And it's hard from a DK perspective to really gauge what's going to happen. I mean, you know that Cruz doesn't have the power to really do anything. But he, it's just going to be a striking match for 25 minutes, essentially.
Yeah, agreed.
I feel Cejudo doesn't even attempt that many takedowns. I really don't. I really don't think he attempts that many takedowns. He just comes in there and comes to the striking mentality.
Well, that's kind of my real question with the entire fight, though, right? It's like, is Cruz because if Cruz is just not himself, Cejudo's going to win it. But if he is, I think we both agree Cruz is probably the better pure striker, or at least in his peak Cruz was. So it's like, I agree with you. I don't think grappling is going to be very important at all in this fight. I think it's going to be a lot of stuff at distance. And I'll tell you this, if Cejudo goes out there and smokes out Cruz, I will bend the knee and happily call him one of the best ever. I am a little bit skeptical, though. So, and let me just one quick thing about that. I'm not skeptical of his talent. He's an elite fighter. But let's be real. He almost lost the DJ fight. That was really close. Dillashaw was dehydrated as in that fight. You almost have to throw that fight out. And the Moraes fight was incredible. That was an incredible job. But I'd like to see more.
Yes, I mean, I doubted him in the TJ fight. I doubted him in the Moraes fight. And those 2 fights are the ones that really were eye-openers for me. I mean, yes, I know TJ was dehydrated, but he hydrated for that fight. After he dehydrated, he got some water, he got rehydrated. But then he comes and withstands the power. You're talking about Moraes is probably the hardest hitting 135er in the entire world. Period. That dude is so jacked. It's ridiculous. Like, those leg kicks were thunderous leg kicks, okay? I mean, and he was taking these shots, and he kept walking forward. He walked forward like a zombie, and he just laid it on him. And I know that Moraes definitely, gassed out, but that power and that pressure is what made him gas out. And I don't know.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I don't know if
I lost 10 units across the Cejudo's last 2 fights. I maxed TJ and I maxed Moraes.
Me too.
It was not fun. But I don't think Cruz can do that. I think there's a chance that Cruz still has more left than people are giving him credit for. But we'll see. That's going to be the beauty of it.
No, it's definitely possible. But let's keep on going. We have the main event of the evening. Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson, interim lightweight championship on the line. Right now, I believe it's around this. Tony Ferguson minus 175 favorite. The comeback on Justin Gaethje plus 155. Tony Ferguson has an applied probability of winning at 63.64%, and the comeback on Gaethje is 39.22%. So, are you rostering one of these 2? If you are, who is it? Let's get into it.
First of all, let me just preface this by saying this is going to be the most unpopular take that anyone's ever given on a live show with you. But I am more happy about this being the main event of this event that's happening than Tony could be. This is arguably the main event of the UFC history here for the pure violence factor.
Absolutely. Hall of Fame fight right here. Absolutely. Yeah. Hall of Fame.
I am so pumped. So, am I rostering? Yes. I will have 100% exposure to this fight. Gaethje is actually my preferred play here. He's my number 1 on the entire slate. As you know, I have a small play on Gaethje. We'll talk about that Friday, but I think Gaethje's got a much more viable opportunity here than people are giving him credit for. If you actually look at, even his numbers in losses, Gaethje's put up 56 and I think 68 points in the 2 losses in the UFC. So, and I do think if Ferguson beats him, it's likely to be by attrition and likely later in the fight if he finishes him. And I do think if we go to all the way to the cards here and Ferguson takes a decision, Gaethje's liable to put off 80 to 90 points, and at that number,
Absolutely.
easily pay that off. And so I think I'm not saying you should go own Gaethje in 100% of lineups, but if you're entering 100 lineups, I'd own him in at least 50. I'm probably going to be skewing more like 65-35 Gaethje in this spot. Maybe a little overlap and just stack just in case there is that situation where Ferguson goes for like 130 and he goes for 90. But this is it. This is like the main event of the year, and we have 3 events in a week coming up. But this is awesome. And yeah, so Gaethje's going to be my top play. Ferguson would be my second preferred play here on the entire slate. And in terms of cash games, you have to roster, I think, both of them in every cash game.
Agree. Yeah. You have to have both these guys on your lineup. 50-50, 60-40. I don't know. Whatever your split is, these guys have to be in your lineup. Absolutely. You can, if you truly, truly think this is going to go the distance, I don't. But you can stack them. Essentially, you can. Because their output is unreal. You're talking about Gaethje has the highest output in the entire UFC, period, at 8.57 strikes landed per minute. That's not throwing, okay? He's throwing 15.58 strikes per minute. That's definitely the most in the UFC history. And then you talk about he has the highest accuracy in, I think, the lightweight division in lightweight history at 55%. So he's very, very, very efficient. And he's got insane knockout power. 20 of his 21 wins have come by knockout. Okay. So if you think of it that way, if he wins, it's normally by knockout. If Ferguson wins, most of the time he does win inside the distance. So, but I feel like you gotta roster one of these 2 guys. Either way, it doesn't matter who wins. You're gonna get. I think one of these guys is in the optimal lineup. Period.
Yeah.
But yeah, these guys are definitely you gotta get them in. I can't wait for this main event. I can't wait for the fights, man. I'm just ready to go. I got not much else to say, but let's get these fights this weekend. And I'm so stoked. I hope one of us, or we hope you guys, cash out and get this Millie Maker. If we don't get it, we hope one of you get it. But before we end this little thing, let's run down a lineup that you would like to give out, and I will give out one of my favorite lineups to you guys.
All right. So we're trying. The goal here is to give out a lineup that's going to win the million, right? It's going to be a solo winner here.
Solo winner, win the million.
Okay. All right. I'm going to throw out something at you that's a little crazy here. So we're going to start this lineup with Jeremy Stephens. We are going to then move to Justin Gaethje, Nico Price, and then hold on, let's see, Tony Ferguson, Anthony Pettis, and Fabricio Verdum.
Okay, that's a great lineup. Recap that
now, and that's also something to keep in mind if you're running something like only like 5-10 lineups here, you might want to do a low or mid-range geared lineup here. Crazy stuff happens, and in that 7K range, it could easily be you get 3 or 4 of those guys hitting optimal if they all get finishes.
True, very true. Okay, I'm doing my lineup on, on my phone because I didn't have it set. So don't worry, guys. I'll do it in one quick second for you guys. Okay, so I'll just do it I'll say it as I do it. Okay, I got Fabricio Verdum. I got Nico Price. Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Then I got Henry Cejudo. And then I'm also taking, let's go with the big guns. Go with the big guns. And I'm going to take Justin Gaethje. Where the hell is he at? Justin Gaethje and Ryan Spann. Boom. Verdum, Price, Rosenstruik, Cejudo, Gaethje, Spann. So all be some finishers right there. That's all finishing ability. 2 5-rounders, finishing ability. That's going to get us the Millie Maker. Let's get this. Okay, so that wraps up our first.
You want to call out the Friday show?
Oh, yeah. It's, well, wrapping up this thing here. So, but yeah, guys, we got another podcast coming out this Friday. We'll let you know the name a little bit later. We're still kind of working on it a little bit, but we got Friday night, 9 p.m. We'll be back on here on our YouTube channel, on the Facebook page. I'm trying to get the Twitter thing going there as well. So yeah, just 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're gonna break down all the fights, all the bets, all the values, all that good stuff like we normally do. And then also Saturday, don't forget. Fighter and the Analyst, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Like right before the fights, we get those bets in with my boy Peter Petties, like always. So with that said, where can everybody find you on the Twitterverse or the Instagramverse or the Facebook? Where can everybody find you at?
Yeah, you can find me at MMA Fox. That's FAWKES, and my name on it is JohnStargaryan MMA. I will hopefully be putting together a Facebook page after this GK. That thing, you got a bunch of steam on that. So
yes,
yeah,
sir.
But that's where you can find me now. I'm also on YouTube at JohnStargaryan MMA, and I am always down to talk fights, down to argue with you, down to just talk, give advice, whatever. Fade me or follow me. I love it either way.
Sounds good, man. So you guys know where to follow me at Fight Analyst on Instagram and Twitter, The Fight Analyst on Facebook, and thefightanalyst.com. You can buy my packages, guys. You can buy my packages, thefightanalyst.com, or you can message me for my picks and packages. We got live betting Saturday night as well. We got a live betting show going on. We got a lot of money to be made. 3 events, 7 days. You know where it's at. We're here to make you guys a ton of money. So with that said, we will talk to you guys next week. You guys have a good one. I'm out. Later, fellas.
Take it easy, Jeff.
Peace.
Peace.